and we'll go from there. Okay, everybody, welcome to the live stream. We're starting a little bit late. We had some audio problems to begin with. My name is Frank, and I'm from Learning and Technology with Frank. So you may know me if you're watching this through YouTube. This Learning and Technology with Frank is my YouTube channel, where we look at ways that we can use technology to help people learn and teach more effectively and be more productive. And I'm also have Summit Tech Academy. So Summit Tech Academy is my website, where I have various different resources and different mini courses and such that you can look at to help you achieve more using technology as well. So welcome very much to the live stream. I'm glad that you're here. And tonight we're going to talk about digital transformation, why it's such an important area, why we want to make sure that we understand digital transformation, what it's all about, and why it's important for us. So when it comes to digital transformation, it's a term you're going to hear a lot. So you hear digital transformation being used by business, you hear it being used in education, you hear it being used by governments and society, and a lot of individuals are maybe kind of wondering, how do I jump on board with this? How do I get my own skills to the point where I can participate? Because if we know that there's a lot of changes being made, then we know that we need to be able to adapt to those changes. So when we talk about things like society, this is where we have a lot of governments, a lot of municipalities, at every level of government is looking at how they can create a society that is more efficient and more effective by using technology to become more efficient and effective. Of course, that means that our educational institutions have to adapt to this as well. And I've been teaching, I just reached my 25th anniversary as an instructor in a post-secondary institution. And I've seen a lot of changes to education. In some regards, I haven't seen things change fast enough. And in some regards, I've seen things change rapidly. But the point is that our educational system does need to adapt to the way that people are going to need to learn in an environment where we are going through a digital transformation. And continuing, I would say that the transformation is also, we may change into a digital world, but besides transformation, there's also going to be a continuance of those digital skills. Then, of course, business is very interested in this because, if a business can become more efficient, then the business can make more profit, can be more effective. And so business is really working towards digital transformation. But there is a bit of a back push on that. I'm going to talk about that through this live stream. I'm going to talk about how digital transformation has these different perspectives, but also how with digital transformation, a huge responsibility goes to the individual. And that's because of changes in the way that people work. So it used to be many years ago that you would get a job, you'd be with the same company for many, many years, and then you would retire. That's kind of not the way things work. So the onus of where the skill set lies is shifting. So, there was a time where education would provide you with the skills you needed to be successful, but because those skills are rapidly changing, it's no longer sufficient just to go to school, get educated, and get a job. Business used to provide you with a lot of opportunity to get the skills that you needed, but in the same way that employees don't stick with one company for a long period of time, businesses are reluctant to do a heavy investment in a lot of employees because of that. And therefore, some skills are going to be your skills that you have to develop on your own. And really, it's going to be the combination of these things that build your ability to participate in a digital transformation. It's going to be both educational systems, businesses that transform, as well as individuals. So let me show you a little bit of what I'm talking about here when we talk about digital transformation. First of all, the thing that we have to look at is that we have in any organization, any business, we have processes. So we have different processes that we use in order to accomplish any type of objective. And this is a map. If you're a former student of mine, or if you've been a student of mine in any of my classes, my infrastructure classes, my business intelligence classes, chances are at some point I've shown you this diagram. This is a process diagram that allows us to look at the activities that we do and break them down into component pieces so that we can understand where we may digitize or look for opportunities to make them more efficient with either technology or datafy them. So a lot of times I'll use this in my data classes. So a lot of times when it comes to my data classes, I'll really focus on things like KPIs and quality parameters, and we'll look at how we can digitize those. But be aware that when it comes to any type of process that I might have, there are always going to be a lot of resources that come into play for those processes. And those resources are increasingly digital. Those are increasingly technical resources and digital resources. In fact, I could argue that this entire process map, we're seeing more and more digital processes being brought into our organization, whether it's to move data around or whether it's to move information around, whatever the case may be. A lot of times we're seeing the activities that relate to these processes are actually digitized. And what ends up happening is that, and I'll just show you the cover of this book, we then see a shift in society where we're no longer going to produce product in the same way that we did before. What we're going to produce is we're going to produce digital product, we're going to produce digital artifacts, we're going to produce creative products, programs, we're going to produce data sets, we're going to manipulate data sets in order to have understanding. And this book by Richard Florida is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. If you check out the links in all of the platforms, I put links to my Amazon store where you can probably see this book as well. But it's in The Rise of the Creative Class. Richard Florida really spends quite some time talking about this new workforce that's coming into the world, where the people doing the work are less bound to a specific organization or even necessarily a specific location. So now people live where they want to live, they work for whom they want to work for, and the people that are most in the position to do that are those people with digital skills. So by acquiring digital skills, either through education, through your workplace, or on your own, and I'll talk about what some of those skills are in a moment, by acquiring those skills, you become part of the creative class. You become nomadic in the sense of not that you're moving around necessarily, but nomadic in terms of your ability to move to whichever business you want to work for. You can work for any organization you would like to work for. You are not bound to one location, one business, one place. And this means that you're also not bound to one educational institution. You can get your education from multiple resources. You can get some knowledge from my YouTube videos if you want. You can get some knowledge from mini courses that I might do or someone else might do. You might take a formal course at a university. You might take a seminar at a coding boot camp. There are so many ways to learn that if you're part of this creative class that uses and leverages digital technology, hence digital transformation, then you become part of this creative class. And in this book, The Rise of the Creative Class, Richard Florida really talks about how municipalities or how provinces or states down in the US have to adapt in order to attract the creative class into their ecosystem. So if you're a business or if you're a city or if you're a place in the world and you want to build economic prosperity for any purpose, you're going to have to address the fact that a lot of that economic prosperity will be created by the creative class, and you're going to have to build systems to support them. And I'll talk about that again, right? So when we talk about our learning, this is by Danny Johnson. We can talk about 70% of our learning, and these are not scientific numbers, it's just to give you a sense of ratio. 70% of our learning is through experience. So what we need to do is provide an opportunity for anybody that we want to be using technology more effectively to experience the use of that technology. 20% is through interaction and group work. Mostly interaction. I use group work in my own teaching, but a lot of it is with interaction with others. And then about only 10% is formal instruction. Again, these are not scientific percentages. These are more ratios, just to give you an idea. What this means for us is that if we're in education or any of the perspectives, society, education, business, or individuals, we need to construct our digital transformation with the understanding that we want to create experiential environments, we want to have interactive environments, and then we want to have some formal instruction or structured coursework as well. Now, as somebody who focuses a lot on the formal instruction, I've had to adapt a lot of I've always taught this way, but I've seen a lot of adaptation in the educational world where, if you're really trying to help people learn and get the digital transformation occurring, then you need to ensure that you design your learning so that the formal instruction really facilitates interaction, and the interaction really is there to support experience, working from the bottom up. And so when we look at it, we can look at continuous learning models, because at its core and at its heart, any type of digital transformation requires continuous learning. So if we look at this continuous learning model, and this continuous learning model was developed, I've got the reference here in terms of the continuous learning model here. This is by Powder Templates, but we have education. So we have our educational, we have exposure, we have the environment that we're in, and we have the experience. So you can see how closely this models the 70-20-10 model, which there's also a book by the same name. What I wanted to focus on here with the continuous learning model as it relates to digital transformation is more on the fact that there are immediate experiences, there are intermediate experiences, and then there are traditional. So when we talk about immediate, right? So immediate says, what do I need to do to support my success, my learning, and what I'm doing right now in the moment? Now, a lot of this type of learning or transformation is something that can be facilitated in the workplace. So this is really where a lot of business teaching and business training would come into play, because this would be something that you want somebody to be able to perform immediately. So that's either peer-to-peer or workplace learning. When we start talking about intermediate, that's where it's, how do I grow in my current role? This is an area where I see a lot of my students or potential students really struggling, because they may have a skill set and they want to acquire skill sets that will help them be more successful. So maybe they already have a job, maybe they already have a skill set, and they want to look at what skills do I get today that are going to help me grow in that position, or to do better, or to be more successful. And this is really the heart of sort of micro courses. This is the heart of a lot of the different resources where if you have that lifelong learning, so a lot of businesses will want lifelong learners. If you have that passion for lifelong learner, you often will have a lot of intermediate educational goals. And those can be served in small pieces over a shorter period of time, but they still are intended to help you have growth and help you develop your career. And then, of course, we have the traditional, and that's what do you need to grow your career. And that might be more the role that traditional education plays. So when we look at the mix of this continuous learning model, we have to say, where does each of the perspectives fit into it? As a society, we often will look at what traditional decisions can we make to build infrastructures for traditional learning. As an educational institution, we were very traditional for a long time, but I think we're shifting a lot to provide more intermediate type of experiences, and to some extent through partnerships, some of the immediate stuff to do workplace learning, but utilize educational institutions for that. From a business standpoint, we tend to hire people that have gone through traditional learning. We look for character traits for intermediate learners, and we promote them within the organization. So if somebody goes out and learns Excel on their own and then brings that into the workplace, we'll often say, well, there's somebody who has built their career by doing that continual learning. And then the immediate would be the training to do the job at hand. So we would, definitely be in that situation there. So if we take a look at what some of the skills are, This is a little bit of a digital transformation mind map or model that I've built. If you're interested in that, comment down below and I'll find a place to share it and put a link down below. But this is really the ecosystem or the skill sets that comprise what you'll need in order to participate in digital transformation. And this is really sort of a goal here of mine, is to have live streams or to have resources for you where you're going to be able to learn a lot of these things. And like any type of learning, what we want to do is we want to scaffold the learning, which means that we want to have, basic skills that we're going to teach. And then what we want to do is we want to move those into intermediate skills, and we want to move those into advanced skills. And as an individual, and really if I'm doing a live stream or if I'm creating YouTube videos or little micro courses, I'm trying to help you as an individual. I'll tell you a brief story, about myself. I mean, I had a career, I had a job prior to being an instructor where I constantly would work and I did quite well in everything. But it wasn't until I took my own self-efficacy to do learning, to go out and get some additional learning around certifications, around skill sets that allowed me to apply and be successful for career advancement opportunities. So I'm very, very passionate about trying to help you as an individual succeed by providing you resources and or direct micro training on all of these areas. So when we talk about things, we talk about a skill such as digital literacy, making sure that people understand technology. And I'll break into these a little bit to explain them in a little bit more depth. We want to make sure people are able to have critical thinking skills so that people understand what's involved in critical thinking and what's so that they can actually synthesize knowledge appropriately. Digital citizenship, to make sure they're using technology in an effective way. The various different applications. This is often where people will go to first when they think about digital transformation. They'll think, oh, I'm going to learn how to use Excel, or I'm going to learn how to use PowerPoint. And those skills are absolutely critical. However, there's, as you can see from this mind map, there's so much more than just learning an application and calling that digital transformation. Skill sets around networking. This is networking of systems as opposed to networking with people. People networking would be considered professional skills. This type of networking is you need to understand how the internet works. You need to understand how networks work because that's part of being digitally literate, right? Then we look at infrastructure skills. So there's a number of different infrastructure elements you need to be aware of. Data analytics often is an area where people view that as a singular way of becoming digitally transformed, sometimes referred to as datafying the organization. And when we looked at the process map and I talked about KPIs, that is definitely an area where I see a lot of businesses saying, if I can just get data visibility on my organization, that will transform it. It won't. It's just an aspect of transformation. It's an important aspect, and it's one that we see a lot of people moving towards, but definitely data analytics, while important, isn't entirely the one solution. None of these are the one solution. You need all of them. And then content creation. So the ability to communicate your ideas and the ability to build a digital reputation is actually, as an individual, absolutely critical, especially if you're going to be nomadic in terms of moving from business to business, not staying at one job for 10 years, 20 years, whatever the case may be. If you want to switch jobs every 2 or 3 years, then you need to be able to have a very good portfolio of your work that's visible and shared. So the ability to create content, whether it's a blog post or some mechanism to demonstrate your skill set, whether it's GitHub reputation, whatever it may be, that's actually an important part of a skill set that leads towards digital transformation. And then there's some advanced ones that I'll talk about as well. So, when I get a lot of people come up to me and they say, how can I get into the industry? How can I build a career? How can I enhance my career when it comes to working with computers? Well, one of the first things we have to do is just the basics. And it's amazing to me sometimes how many people don't have even just the basics of computer skills. This is your first step. This is the type of skill that we would want to hopefully start teaching at the junior high or high school level, so that people coming out of the public school system have these skills in place. Things like understanding what a computer is, how to turn it on. And that might seem, oh, well, if you already know how to turn on a computer, if you're already participatory in the field, that might seem simplistic, but at some point you had to learn that. So at some point, we have to make sure that people understand the basics of computers. And this is really critical, because a lot of times I'm now seeing we'll have a new generation coming into an environment, and they'll bring out their smartphone and they'll be like, I understand the smartphone, no problem, but I don't understand things like file management. I don't understand things like the foundation of how the internet actually works. I just press a button and it's there. I don't understand cloud services and why cloud services are important. I don't understand the basics of storage and how I can store files and find them when I need them. Even the basics of computing, right? And the basics of some of the social media platforms, not from a consumer standpoint, from how they fit into a business or how they fit into a digital transformation. So a lot of times, beginning with digital literacy is a very important part of ensuring that society, students, businesses, and individuals all have a way of communicating and starting to scaffold their skills from basic to more advanced. So that's kind of an important element in there as well. We can also take a look. So another area that we often can take a look at is our critical thinking skills. Let me just move this back here. So we can take a look at critical thinking skills. This is an area that we're seeing more and more literature come out on and a lot more people talking about. And that is the ability to intelligently evaluate information. So it's very important that we develop skills, not just to consume information, but to distinguish which information and which sources are valid and be able to make good decisions about the quality of the data and the information we're receiving. I could go into a lot of detail about this, obviously, but it is something that is kind of lacking in many cases and something that we need to build for our digital all of these relate to digital transformation. This also relates to things like digital safety, ensuring that we understand what is and is not safe to do in an environment where we may have people that are a little less scrupulous, right? So we want to make sure that we understand digital safety and also just basic good research skills to find quality information. I always talk to my students when it comes to data, and I say to them, you know what? You put bad data in, you get bad results. So, there's the old system when we used to do systems analysis. And one of the keys when we did systems analysis is that you don't just find a faster way to move paper around, because if the moving of the paper around makes no sense, all you've done is a faster way to do the wrong thing. And we don't want to do that. So critical thinking becomes a major component as well. We also look at what does it mean to be a digital citizen. So when we talk about digital citizenship, this is really where we talk about ethics and professionalism within the context of digital realm. So things like, how do we behave when nobody's looking? And if you're on the internet and if you're anonymous behind a computer screen, there's a lot of cases where you feel nobody is looking. Now, there is a whole other subject we could talk about, which is open source intelligence, if you're interested in that, where people are looking, whether you think they are or not. But this isn't, that might be following more advanced digital transformation stuff. It's an area that I am interested in. But the idea of having an ethical stance when it comes to using information and digital things, or how do you treat other people's information? So if you're a business and you're undergoing a digital transformation, that data about your customers can theoretically be sold and you can make money off that. But is it ethical to do that behind their backs or even in front of their backs, right? You want to make sure that you're behaving well in terms of digital citizenship, and that falls into professional skills as well, and having professionalism around the way that you treat and work with data. So hopefully this is interesting to you so far and you're seeing some of the different areas. This is actually just sort of the beginning of where I would like to go with some of these live streams. I would like to dig into each of these topics in a little bit more depth. And certainly, if you're watching now, feel free to comment. Or if you're watching after I've edited the front part out and I've put this onto the platforms out there, feel free to comment down below on specific areas you're interested in. Now, when it comes to applications, this is where, a lot of people really move when it comes to digital transformation. They say, if I can just learn Power BI, if I can just learn Tableau, if I can just learn how to program in Python, I'll have transformed myself into one of the creative class, into a digital nomad where I have skill sets that I can bring into the world, and I get to choose where I work. I get to choose for whom I work. I get to choose how I work because of my skill sets. But it's only part of the picture. You want to learn things like Microsoft Office. It's used extensively in business, and you want to learn it with enough depth that you can use it to be effective. So knowing what it is not great. That would be that 10% where you have the formal training on what Excel is. Then you have maybe interaction, where you're working with somebody on an Excel spreadsheet. That gives you a little bit more. But the real key here is to gain experience with Excel or PowerPoint or Word or whatever programs are most relevant for your career path. And those ones are relevant to almost everybody's career path. So then you also need to be able to use tools like remote collaboration tools, because a lot of times we're going to work with people and interact with them in ways that we never did before. For example, Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, whatever the case may be. So that would be applications. We also want to understand the foundations when it comes to digital resources around networking. What is a computer network? How does traffic move on the internet? If we're going to be moving our traffic and our data on the internet, we need to understand the foundation and the basics of the internet. So if we're using networks, we should understand networks. I always draw this analogy that it's pretty hard to drive on a road if you don't know what a road is, or you don't know what an exit is, or you don't know what a stop sign is. Well, the road that we're driving on in the digital world is a network. Specifically, we're going to be a corporate network and an inter-network, the internet. So we should understand things like firewalls, network troubleshooting, VPNs, how to remote access. These are some foundational skills that we should understand about networking as well. I would always add in there as well that we may wish to understand voice over IP or telephone systems as well. There's a lot that I could add to these. I'm just sort of tonight just going through an overview of what I think the basket of skills is. And then I'll also show you what I do with my students to help them actually acquire these skills. So things like infrastructure, we should understand identity solutions, logging onto systems. This has gone through a massive change recently, where we are no longer going to be using username and passwords to log into systems. We're going to be using tokens. We're going to be using passcodes in order to get into systems, and understanding how to actually access the resources that we want to access. That's going to be pretty important. Things like virtualization, the more robust storage concepts in terms of cloud storage, shared storage, network accessible storage, storage area networks, different web concepts, not just how to use the internet, but to actually how the internet works, how we can set up resources that people can come to, and how we can go to other resources, and things like security and antivirus. So that can also be expanded upon, as we will see in a bit too. The next area that we look at, this is obviously a favorite of mine. I teach data analytics and business intelligence. So building systems that support business intelligence and data analytics is really something that I teach a lot of students. And this is a very sought after area. So the employment rate for my students is quite big. Hello, how's it going? Solar Hive in the chat. How's it going? Hello, Jim. And I don't know if you caught the first part. It was a little bit cut out with the audio, so I'll be editing it. But we're just doing the digital transformation, some of the skill sets that are key here. And if we look at data analysis as a key skill set around digital transformation, that's really, how do I source, find, and present information, not for the sake of creating a pretty graph, but for the sake of building a decision tool that allows me to feel more confident in the decisions I make using data. That's a very important thing to be able to do in order to ensure that that we're working with data in a way that supports decision making. I obviously have a lot more to say about data analysis and the skills around that, but it is part of the overall map when it comes to working and building our digital transformation. Let me just scroll out a little bit, move over. As always, I put this mind map on here. Like I said, if you're interested in the actual mind map itself, just let me know. I can find a way to get you the PDF of all this as well. And I've expanded out, by the way. This is just the 30,000 foot view of things. I'm be diving into these. Now, content creation is a strange one, because when I talk to people about why it's necessary for them to be able to create content, this is really so that you are transportable. And I know I've harped on this a little bit. I've talked about the concept of, being able to work with, solar panels such. Yeah, so workforce development around solar panels, huge digital information in there as well, I'm assuming, right? So, so let's say, for example, using content creation as an example and solar panels as an example, you need to be able to demonstrate and create content for people to understand what it is that you can do in that area. So let's say you're building an XR solution around, demonstrating, I don't know solar panels, so don't laugh at me about this, but let's say you're building a XR solution to show someone's building or home or whatever facility it is, and you want to have a visualization of the percentage of power that can be supplied with solar versus traditional, and what that looks like in terms of costing and such. Well, a video online might be good, blog might be good, online presence be good. In your case, you know what? We can put another line on here, and we could have something like, an XR or VR type of experience that allows somebody to immerse themselves in seeing your solution live. So content creation becomes a really important part of being able to message your skill set. So when you look at something like showing the asset or showing the content that you produce, it's very important that you have basic digital literacy around content creation. That's a huge part of transformation. So, and then finally, probably the area that everybody goes into is when we talk digital transformation. If you go to a conference or something, everybody focuses on the advanced topics. Things like cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, machine learning, search engine optimization, information of things, right? I might actually, Jim, say, a lot of people talk about XR and VR in here as well. And these are absolutely apex cutting edge things. I would argue that if you're going to do this, you need to understand file systems. You need to understand compute. You need to understand storage. You need to understand everything that I've been talking about, or I began talking about here. You need to scaffold the knowledge, because if we're going to actually transform an organization, and if we focus our energy on just one of these silos, then what ends up happening is people that don't possess basic digital literacy will be absolutely lost in terms of trying to find a pathway to get to these advanced topics. And I think this is really the important aspect of looking at digital transformation from the perspectives of society, education, business, and the individual. And that goes to the continuous learning model, but also to look at the different elements that make up digital transformation. You do not need to become an expert in all of these fields, but you do need to be conversant enough so that if your objective is to do data analysis, you understand basic file storage. So you know where the data lives. You know where the data came from. And if you're doing IoT collection, you also need to maybe understand things like cloud services, and you need to understand things like networks. So this is sort of the map that I've come up with that I'm hoping to do some more live streams on, where I'm going to be able to go through and talk about different subjects, because my goal is to help you in the same way that I would help students in my classes. One of the exercises that I do with my students that I think is one of the most valuable exercises that I do is a skills matrix. And what I ask students to do is I ask them to go out and I ask them to find potential careers or where they would like to work, those types of things. And then what I'll have them do is I will have them list the skills. So let's say one of the skills is, and if I could spell it correctly, let's say one of the skills is something like Python programming. So I want them to say, okay, how frequently does Python appear in terms of my potential career interests? So job postings are perfect for this. This is what I have my students do. And so let's say they look at a total of, say, 15 job postings. Let's say Python appears in 5 out of 15 of those job postings. Let's say they view Python on a scale of 1 to 10 as being moderately difficult to learn, maybe a 7 out of 10. Maybe they currently feel they have some programming skills, so they rate themselves as a 2 out of 10. Maybe it's so integral to what they want to do that they rate it as a 10 out of 10, that they want to acquire the skill. And then they can take a course from, well, I don't have a course on Python at Summit Tech Academy right now, but maybe they decide that they're going to take that through Coursera, right? And they're going to take it from Dr. Chuck. He's the guy to take your Python course with if you're going to take a Python course. This now becomes a matrix. And maybe one of the skills is something like agile development, right? So they must be familiar with agile development methodologies. And maybe the frequency on these 15 jobs is they see that show up in 12 out of the 15 jobs. It is a very sought after skill. A lot of organizations want that. And maybe they view the difficulty of that to not be too hard to become familiar with it, but they currently don't know very much about it, and they would like to be a 10 out of 10. Well, maybe they don't want to be a scrum master. Maybe they want to be able to participate in agile teams, so they want to get to a 7 out of 10 on that. And then they could watch some videos on that, or they could go and take a mini course on that. They could go with formal education. They could do interaction and ask people about it, and they could practice the skill in order to get the experiential learning. And this matrix, of course, can just become quite large. So I can build this up over time. So I can just build more and more. I'm not going to do a whole bunch here, but you get the idea here that I can go in and I can start building up a large matrices, which gives me the ability to both resource and focus where I want to learn. That's taking individual ownership for digital transformation. We could also do this as an organization. So I could do this as a business where I maybe, instead of looking at job postings, what I look is at specific roles within the organization. And we used to have things way back called a job task checklist. This would be a specific job, and say this is a junior programmer, right? So in my organization, I could say a junior programmer has to have certain skills. I could list the skills and I could say, what is my desired ability for that junior programmer? And most organizations, just so you know, would love you to be a unicorn, where you have every skill in the world 10 out of 10, but let's be realistic. So we go in there and we can say, to what level do I want them to be at with that skill? Then I can take any potential applicants, I can rank their current ability, and then I can actually have a employee development plan to help them develop the skills. Certainly within the educational institutions we can build course maps using this type of matrice. And then, of course, from a societal standpoint, we probably could move into something like some of the numbers and figures that Richard Florida addressed in The Rise of the Creative Class. This has a lot of good statistics and data collection around what it is to attract people. So when we look at places like San Francisco, when we look at places like Austin, when we look at recently, we're seeing a lot of in Calgary, a huge rise in the creative class because the city is building infrastructure to support the creative class and what they want. And it's not always just fast internet. And it's not just, it's a combination of, fast internet, reasonable housing prices, cost of living, facilities and parks, arts and culture. Those are what cities and society has to do in order to attract the creative class. This is what we have to do as individuals in order to become part of the creative class. And in terms of overall skill sets, these are what I believe to be the ultimate skill set map that we want to try to build in terms of saying, if I want to scaffold my skills so that I can digitally transform myself. So I know that was a bit of a longer rant this evening during the live stream. I didn't have as many people that were here during the live stream, but thank you very much, Hudson and Jim, for joining us tonight. And if you're watching this after the fact, I'm very interested in, do you see any skill gaps? Do you see any perspectives besides society, educational institutions, business, and individuals that would have a stakeholder in this process? Do you see the benefits of developing not just a singular skill, but a basket of skills that's well-rounded to help you succeed? And hopefully, if there's one thing I hope that you get from tonight, is I hope you see that you have control of your own learning. You have control of your own sort of where you want to take things. See if I can scroll this out a little bit. You have control of where you can go and develop skills. And I can help you. I can help you through my YouTube channel. I can help you through the Summit Tech Academy courses I have. And there are many other people that can help you as well. I'm always a big fan of trying to resource people. And a lot of times you'll see on my channel, I'll talk about specific skills that I think are worth acquiring. And some of them will be quite easy to acquire. And I can do a simple video on it. Some will be a little more complex and I'll do a mini course on it. So I hope you found that interesting. Thank you so much for joining us this evening or watching this after the fact. And I hope that digital transformation is something that you're interested in, and that after looking at the structure that I demonstrated tonight, you feel confident in beginning the process of your own individual digital transformation. Join me on my YouTube channel, join me over at Summit Tech, and we'll see what we can do to help you with your quest to acquire some of these skills, identify and acquire these skills. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next live stream where I'll focus on maybe one or two specific skills and provide you with information on that. Take care. Have a good night, everyone.